Good morning, everybody. Thanks for checking into our latest TDR Traded Black podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Shad Dales. Another day goes by, another day closer to the federal election that's coming up on Tuesday, November the 5th. Today, I know we've talked a lot about what would it look like if Trump would win? What would it look like if Kamala Harris would win when it comes to cannabis reform? We want to take it a step further. We want to look at the Senate. Who are some DOJ current appointees that's going on right now? What's going to happen? Could the Democrats continue to control the Senate, or could the Republicans? Who are appointees basically that would be aligned within the Republican Party, knowing that Mitch McConnell is retiring? So we want to dive in, go a little bit deeper, because we always talk about the presidential candidates and who's in chair is sitting at the president right now. But let's look even further at the House and Senate and the people that are involved there and how this could basically reshape cannabis reform. So with that, let's welcome in Anthony Varell here on a Friday morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Yeah, I mean, I think it's something we don't talk about enough. I mean, the minutia and the more detached positions from the executive branch do have more influence than what we all think via the president.
It's the most important thing, right? And I know that that tweet yesterday that on the to-do list for Kamala Harris is legalize recreational cannabis. But for people that don't follow the space, they're going to look at this, see a headline and say, hey, she's got my vote. But she can't do that. And we want to walk people through as to why she can't do it. And then what are potential scenarios as to how she could do it. So this morning, it's all about the Anthony's show. So let's welcome in the CEO of NewLake Capital, which trades on the OTC under the ticker symbol NLCP, Anthony Coniglio. Back to the podcast. Good to see you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, guys. Good to see you.
Yeah. See you. I don't know if you've been watching. What'd you think of the interview we did Wednesday with Senator Gruters out of Florida? Did you get a chance to see it?
I did. And I was really happy to see him kind of locked in, full support, but also really focused on how to implement a quality program. Because I think if Florida approves the Amendment 3 in a couple of weeks, the implementation of that program is also going to be important for the other red states. I think you've had a really good implementation in Missouri. And if you want to see the other red states roll out similar implementations, getting it right in Florida is going to be important. So it was good to see him focus on the future, not just the vote.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for logging on here this morning. Irish, happy Friday to you as well. Guap, good to see you. Hope you're doing well, buddy. And a few others. Dylan Rogers, always happy to see you. But as I said off the top, it's not so much about who's sitting in the chair as president. It's who's sitting in the chairs in the Senate and House. So by doing this, let's create 2 to 3 scenarios of what a Kamala Harris presidency or a Trump presidency would look like for rescheduling and really overall advancing cannabis reform. So let's begin. I know I'll get into more details, but that tweet that was pushed out yesterday by Kamala Harris, putting cannabis at number 6 on her to-do list if she were elected president. So first step of education, I'll begin with you, Anthony Coniglio. She can't do this on her own, correct? If so, walk us through why.
Yeah, correct. And I think if you just look at the Biden administration, it's a big part of what fueled all of the run up in the stock prices and the excitement around the industry after the last election, because people mistakenly believed that Biden could swipe his pen and could legalize cannabis. But we've all seen that it can't happen. It has to happen through legislation or descheduling through the DEA process. We know that the DEA going through a Schedule 3 process isn't about to change. There isn't the body of evidence there for them to be able to change course and now completely deschedule. It hasn't been presented that way, and it would be unlikely for them to go against HHS and just completely deschedule. So there's no basis that I'm aware of and that the smart people that I follow are aware of where she can just do it on her own. She's going to have to get Congress to act.
Yeah, of course. And Anthony V, we've talked about this a lot. So what would need to happen for cannabis to be legalized recreationally across the country? What are some necessary steps if she wants to do this? A lot of different scenarios that are at play here. But in the event she is president, what are the first steps that she's going to have to do to get this accomplished?
She'd have to create an agenda and have it done congressional, like Anthony just alluded to. She'd have to have it done legislatively through the bodies of government, or she'd have to advise the DEA and the DOJ to take cannabis off of the CSA from an administrative perspective. Aside from those two, there's nothing. She can talk about it all day. Donald Trump can talk about it all day. Neither candidate on either side can just legalize cannabis with the waving of a pen. And I don't think the United States is ready for cannabis to be legalized as much as we all want it to be. I think it's a pipe dream. that either candidate is running on legalization promises. I think the more realistic thing, and I'm sure Anthony will agree with this, is the rescheduling process that we're going through right now. Get nonviolent cannabis offenders out of jail from a criminal justice reform standpoint, and keep the state level momentum going, and wait and see what happens with the incremental research that rescheduling brings, as well as the social acceptability of cannabis that keeps going forward. That's going to go through the motions. I think it's going to be like an 8 to 10 year process to get fully decriminalized or fully legalized, to get the country to where it needs to be to have that happen. I just don't see it happening in the next 4 years. If the president could, via executive order, legalize cannabis and they really wanted to, sure, it could get done expeditiously, but we don't happen to be living in that world, and that's a complete fallacy.
So don't get tricked by the headlines based on that tweet, because there's a lot more to it than just legalizing recreational and the process that needs to be made. But Anthony Coniglio, do you agree with Anthony Varel where it's just like 8 to 10 years before we actually see any federal legalization, or do you think it'll happen sooner than that, or will it happen at all?
Yeah, no, I think it absolutely happens. I believe fundamentally we will get there. It's just a matter of time. I think we all want it to be sooner than later. I'm going to stay away from whether it's 5 to 7, 7 to 9, 8 to 10. But I don't see it happening in this next administration. Back to this point about what could she do in working with Congress? Well, we already have a few bills that have been circulated around DC for years now, whether it's the States Act or the CAOA that came out of the Democrats. There are a number of different bills that have been out there. And so we already, going into this next Congress, have a sense where those lines have been drawn, so to speak, from the different sides. And so if she really wanted to lean into this, she could lean into one of those existing bills and try to create some consensus around those existing bills. I think that the low-hanging fruit is certainly safer banking. There's a lot of reasons people on both sides of the aisle want to get that done. So if we're, I don't even want to say lucky, I think the more realistic opportunity for the industry is an incremental approach. Get Schedule 3 complete, get safer banking done at some point in this next Congress, get some additional research going. And then on the back of that additional research, that'll take a couple of years. Then you could use that as the platform for further reform, and potentially even within the contours of the Farm Bill that has to be hammered out still in this new Congress. Maybe there's an opportunity to bring some regulation to THC-oriented products, both whether they be hemp-derived or within the state legal business. So there are opportunities. There is legislation to provide a bit of a path, so to speak. And I think we're more likely to see incremental steps as opposed to a fell swoop change.
Great point here by Guap. The MORE Act would have descheduled cannabis, passed the House twice in 2019 and 2021 with 110 co-sponsors. Kamala introduced in the Senate in 2019, but it died in committee. So well worth reading into and understanding that whole process. So again, we've talked about Trump or Harris, but let's look at who controls the Senate and the House. So in the event the Democrats were to maintain control of the Senate, Chuck Schumer would remain as Senate Majority Leader. However, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, as we all know, is retiring. So who are potential candidates that would replace him, Anthony? Anthony to the far right.
The potential candidates that would replace them right now that we're looking at could be Toon, could be Cornyn, could be Steve Dane. It's up in the air. Obviously, the best one for us would be Steve Daines, as he's been a huge champion of the Safe Banking Act. He's friendly to cannabis, and he happens to be sitting on the right side of the aisle. The other two are less than ideal in their stances on how they voted and just their overall rhetoric towards the industry and towards cannabis as a whole.
Yeah, and we've also. Go ahead.
I was going to throw in, Rick Scott's name has been thrown around. I think of the group, Rick Scott would probably be the worst for us. He has been no against 3. He has some family history that he's been very public about with addiction in his family. I think a lot of our families have unfortunately been touched with addiction. He does lay it at the doorstep of marijuana, and he believes that was where his brother started his addictive habits. And so I think he comes to the conversation very negatively. But if you look at what Thune and Cornyn have said, while they're not friends of the industry, they have said things like, we need more research. We need to be careful about legalizing. We need to manage kids' access. And so I think you could find that they may allow people within their caucus to run with a safer banking bill if it had the right protections and enough support.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Rick might work, I say it like I know him, Senator Scott might work a little bit more actively against it because of his personal feelings.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, the ideal candidate for us, I guess, when it comes to like following this space and cannabis reform would be obviously Senator Steve Daines out of Montana. What is the likelihood of that happening?
Well, I'd say he seems like the dark horse, but his name has been floated by Trump. And so I think the question becomes, how much influence does Donald Trump have if he wins? How much influence does he have in that process? And there have been articles written recently about how members of the Senate have really tried to advise him about staying out of that process. And so it seems like Daines is an unlikely candidate, but you never know. Right? These things are very uncertain. Just look at what happened in Congress earlier this year.
Yeah. So the flip side of that, in the event that the Republicans were take control of the Senate, what should in cannabis investors, or for that matter, anybody involved in this space, be watching closely for if that were to happen, Anthony V?
If the Republicans are to take control of the Senate?
Correct.
I don't know if that's a best case scenario for cannabis. I don't know if I would word it like that. I mean, I'm afraid of a red sweep. If the Republicans take the GOP, if the Republicans also take the House and the Senate, I don't know if that's good for the industry. I don't think there is a best case scenario if you have the GOP take over the Senate. Yeah.
Gretchen makes a good comment here. As much as cannabis is number 6 on that to-do list, we got to also look at number 1, cutting taxes, 2, strengthening Medicare, 3, build 3 million new homes, 4, pass bipartisan immigration reform, and 5, restore productive freedom. Sounds like a lot of work to do. And don't know if we'll ever get to number 6 within the first 4 years, but hence the reason why you can understand why people are not too, reading too much into the tweet that follow this space about cannabis actually getting recreationally legalized within the next 4 years. Let's now go over the list.
Go ahead. One comment that I would make on what Anthony was just talking about. If the Republicans take back the Senate, take a look at the Senate Banking Committee, then the ranking member, who is Tim Scott, not Rick Scott, but Senator Tim Scott, would step into the chairman's seat. Now, Tim Scott voted yes on SAFER back in September of 2023. So at least you'd have a committee chair that is supportive of that legislation. Whereas if you had in previous, if you look back in the previous committees, you would have Senator Crapo was in the chairman's seat, and he wasn't allowing anything to get through committee as it pertains to safe banking. And so if ranking member Scott becomes the head of that committee, you could see an opportunity for safer banking.
Okay. Sorry, you got cut off there for a little bit, but wanted to ask though, like, look, we all know Mitch McConnell was not a big advocate for cannabis. Thanks, Captain Obvious. But if somebody like Daines were to step in, what are some notable things that you think he would need to do when working with Schumer to finally get safe banking a floor vote? Because outside looking in, that changes a lot. Definitely knowing that Daines is a co-sponsor of the bill. But what exactly do you think would be the right approach, or things that would need to be done? Because I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I don't think that McConnell and basically Schumer had all that much conversations, especially pertaining to cannabis. But could you see this building momentum, Anthony V? And if so, like, what would be the approach to take? Do you have any idea?
I don't think it's building momentum. I think it's kind of just extending an olive branch over to Schumer and being like, look, I've got my guys. We've got the votes. If you bring it to the floor, we'll get it passed. I think Daines could influence his side of the aisle. I think Daines could bring the people that the representatives that he needs to get the vote passed. But that's it. It's, as far as I'm concerned, someone like a Daines being in a leadership position, it's pretty black and white. Like, can he get the Republicans to vote, and can he ensure Chuck that if Chuck brings it to the floor, it gets passed?
Does that obviously increase the chances, though, of getting a floor vote?
Yeah, one of my observations has been Sorry, guys, for the delay. One of the things I've always thought was that cannabis as a topic wasn't important enough for people to use the political chips that they necessarily have in their pocket. And so you could see if Danes was sitting in the leadership seat, he might be able to use a political chip to get it done because it's important to him. But in the seat that he's in today, he can't really use the political chip to make a difference. So he's not going to use a political chip. But in the speaker's, not the speaker, but in the leader's seat, he may choose to do that.
Yeah, 100%. I want to look at right now the list of current DOJ appointees. Names have been supportive of advancing cannabis, and really who could be actually Kamala Harris as Attorney General. So when we look at this list of names, first one comes to mind is Catherine Cortez Masto, Senator of Nevada, who has voted yes for SAFER in the past. Also, we look at people of Cory Booker, but maybe walk us through maybe Anthony Coniglio. Who are some of the names that are appointees right now and what their current stance is on cannabis?
Yeah, so this list changes all the time. As of the research that I've done, there are really 6 names that I've heard floated around. One was Cortez Masto. Of course, she voted yes on SAFER. Interesting, if she gets picked, she will be coming out of the Senate, and so they'll need to replace her. And so that's a yes vote within the Senate Banking Committee that needs to be replaced. Likely the Democrats would put somebody else up that would likely support SAFER. So we're probably okay there. Cory Booker, same story. He'd be good for us, obviously. He's not currently on the Senate Banking Committee, but would likely his appointee would support. There's Doug Jones that's been out there, and he's supported descheduling completely as well as states' rights. So another name that would be very supportive. Andy Beshear out of Kentucky is a name that's been floated. And, yeah, and he's been very supportive, and he's implementing a program today. Sally Yates. Now, interesting, Sally's been in the administration before. She's made no specific statements, but her position on criminal justice reform does suggest that she would support it, but we don't have anything specific to point to. And then Vanita Gupta, another name that's been around the DOJ, she's advocated for decriminalization. So another name that would be, I think, very positive. So in all, if Harris were to win, I think our expectation as an industry is that whoever she appoints is likely going to be supportive of Schedule 3 and continuing the progress.
Okay. So when I look at this right now, the Safe Banking Senate Banking Committee has 23 members. 5 Dems are up for re-election versus 1 Republican. Who are some of the Dems that are up for re-election, Anthony Coniglio? Do you know that by chance? I'm just reading some of it right now.
Yeah, I don't have all this committed to memory, so I do have a schedule that we've prepared here at NewLake where we keep track of all this stuff. So of the Dems, you've got 3 of them that are safe. That would be Warren, Butler, and Helmy. We think those seats will definitely stay. And as I do the research, it seems like they're going to be safe. The 2 that are potentially not safe would be Tester and Sherrod Brown. And we know Sherrod Brown's been a real friend of the industry, and that's the one that I think a lot, as has Tester. And so those 2 are getting some attention. Tester's going up against Sheehy, and in the latest polling I've seen, Sheehy's ahead by at least 4 points.
Okay.
And Brown, last I looked, it was a toss-up between him and Moreno.
Gotcha. And the 1 Republican is Kevin Cramer is safe. Good, because Cramer voted yes for SAFER, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, that would be good. He did vote for SAFER.
Okay, there's lots of moving parts here, I know, and I think a lot of people leave some comments below, any questions that you want to ask. But obviously the big thing for us is rescheduling. That's the first step, incremental steps, which will take place. What do you think will happen during that 2-week period that the hearing is going on, and what we can anticipate? I see a big grin on Anthony's face, but are we going to see a lot of bad headlines and people trying to torch, the overall cannabis space? What do you anticipate, Anthony V?
I think Anthony Coniglio said it best in our pre-production meeting. There's going to be a lot of ugly vitriol that's going to be spewed from that hearing. We're going to hear a lot of things that we don't agree with. We're going to hear a lot of things that are damning towards the industry and towards cannabis. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're true. So I think it's going to be a function of kind of staying concrete in your beliefs, staying concrete in what you believe in the sector and in cannabis overall, and kind of blocking out that noise, because these headlines and these things that are stated are going to get national news attention. It's going to be in the headlines, and it's not going to be pretty. The whole point of this hearing is to bring parties forth that could potentially be harmed by the rescheduling of cannabis, which to me is laughable. As we all know, rescheduling does not actually increase the accessibility of the plants. It's got two main things, which is the dissolution of 280E and the dropping of and the increase in research that can be done with cannabis, which also is a big signaling of descheduling that cannabis is not the big bad boogeyman that should be a Schedule 1 narcotic as it is. But there's going to be some shocking shit that winds up in the headlines. It's going to be very important. Just block it out, stay true to what you know, and kind of keep marching forward.
Yeah. Marcus Smith, the date is actually, it begins on December the 2nd, if I'm correct, right, gentlemen?
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, when we see some of these headlines, do you think it'll have any impact on the industry at all, Anthony Coniglio?
I think it's going to have impact on the psychology of the investor base and even the participants in the industry, because nobody's going to like what's going to be said, as Anthony mentioned. So I think it's the psychology. Does it change what people do every day? No, I don't think it'll change. But when I look at the way the Twitter sphere reacts to commentary from No on 3, when you see what people say in a courtroom, people, I think their hair is going to be on fire around this. And I just think we should all remember, is exactly as Anthony said, this is intended to bring out all of the parade of horribles against rescheduling. And we should expect that. And I think people should just wrap their heads around it and not let it get to them so much. This is not a popularity contest. This is a court of law where people, the ALJ specifically, is looking for information pertaining to the rescheduling process.
Yeah. We always talk about stigma. And I brought this up a few times, Anthony Varell, where what could this do for the state of Florida, not only for the state of Florida, but across the country, if Amendment 3 were to pass on election night? I know these are completely different, topics when it comes to the ALJ hearing and rescheduling, but to the minds and the eyes of the American people across the country, how much helpful would it be to have a state like Florida legalize cannabis recreationally to help continue to build change the stigma of the overall industry, regardless of a lot of these headline stories that are probably going to come out during the rescheduling ALJ hearing process? Like, how much could that be helpful? Or do you think it's just two different things, and whoever's going to view it the way they're going to view it, or is going to be the way they view it?
Yeah, I think it's two very different things. Adult use is more so about access. Rescheduling is more so about realizing the wrongs that have been done with having it on Schedule 1. Granted, it's also, we're constitutionally decriminalizing cannabis in the state of Florida with Amendment 3 passing. So that's a big step as well, with righting the wrongs. But I really don't think the two are correlated. However, on a political scale, when you have a big red state with a big red outspoken governor, such as DeSantis, doing all that he can to stifle it, yet you have the will of the people that potentially could be coming in at 66% come election day for recreational cannabis in the state of Florida and passing Amendment 3, that speaks volumes about where we are currently as a country and as a population around cannabis.
Yeah, and you don't think something like that could tame some of those headlines where people just look at this and roll their eyes during the ALJ hearing when they're torching cannabis? No?
It's going to be Kevin Sabat, Luke, and the boys
I
are
hear
just
ya.
going to be, it's going to be lunacy what they're saying, but they're going to have a platform to say that stuff out loud. It's going to be, they're going to bring the heavy artillery to that ALJ hearing and just be saying things that I'm sure none of us agree with. Very little of it will be rooted in fact, but they are going to get the chance to get it out there and have it be said. However, I don't think it's going to have a high impact because, as you see in the polling numbers, as far as the social acceptability of cannabis and just the overall perception of it has greatly changed. Reefer Madness and Dare and Don't Do Drugs, that is all dead.
Yeah, I hear you.
As far as the American American psyche goes. But they're going to be awarded their megaphone. They're going to be allowed to be up there and say whatever they want, and they know that.
Yeah.
So they're going to bring the big guns in their talking points.
Well, I hear you, and I know they're completely separate things, but let's hope Amendment 3 passes. I know it's completely separate, but that's only going to help, I think, the overall stigma across the country and just really bring a lot of attention on this industry for, whatever reasons. I think the right reasons, because if Floridians vote in favor of that, it's just going to continue to spread the word that more states need to obviously pass this and the tax revenue dollars that could generate from it. Do you agree with that, Anthony Coniglio?
I do. And I think from a political perspective, people in the political sphere will be looking at how does the vote on 3 and the vote on Amendment 4, how do those numbers come in relative to the presidential numbers too? And they're going to be looking to see what pulled out the voters and where did the voters support and where did they cross party lines to try to understand politically where the next round of elections should be taking risk. I mean, the fact that we have 2 presidential candidates that have completely embraced cannabis from a political perspective, and that one of those presidential candidates is going to be voting for it, and you're going to be able to see he's likely going to win Florida. I don't know, but likely that's what everybody seems to be saying. So if he wins Florida with, say, 53, 55%, and vote on 3 passes with over 60%, that's going to tell people politically, without a doubt, that it's a winner, that it's a winning topic. And so I think you politically move to a better place in future cycles.
Yeah. Gretchen, I believe with you and I agree with you in certain ways, but the general public does not pay attention to what is going on in other states. I disagree with that to a certain point, because when California basically legalized recreational cannabis, that was national news and made a lot of attention, made the headways, obviously, on late night shows at Jimmy Kimmel. But that was big news, I think, and especially New York as well. And I think that Florida will have that same kind of impact. And timing is everything. And, if you could get something passed like that, it only pushes the narrative forward and how people are viewing cannabis differently. But rescheduling, as you said, Anthony V, we're going to have lots of crazy headlines that are going to be going on during that 2-week process.
Well,
do you guys believe that's what we're looking at, is a 2-week process hearing? Like, what's the timeline that you're thinking at?
I think it's probably going to be longer than that, but I think Anthony just brought up the best point that we've heard yet. The correlation between Donald Trump winning Florida and Amendment 3 passing, that is the inflection point in society in the United States. If a red Republican candidate wins the general in Florida and a cannabis legalization amendment passes simultaneously, that is a changing of the times. With the highest impact.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. So I know we're going to have a lot more in-depth conversation pertaining to moving parts and scenarios in a Trump or Harris presidency related to the Senate and the House. Next week, we're actually going to be hosting a Twitter space. Don Murphy is actually going to be coming on with us. Gretchen, we should probably have you on as well. But we should have a great conversation that really talks about some of these moving parts as we inch closer to the federal election. We're going to let everybody know what day and time that'll be next week. So we'll announce that on Twitter. So if you guys get a chance, just to make sure you stay closely and check out our handle over the weekend, and we'll confirm the day and time as to when we're going to do that. But that'll be a great conversation. One last thing, Anthony Coniglio, before I let you go and before we get more in depth next week with this space, what would be the ideal situation for you that you'd like to see come election night that, again, pushes cannabis reform? You're not going to get anything that announces those sorts of things the night of the election, but what needs to come into place that really starts to build out the advancement of the infrastructure of this space when it does come to cannabis reform heading into the new administration tenure, which begins in January 2025?
Yeah. Outside of Amendment 3, I don't think we're going to wake up Wednesday morning knowing much about the direction of cannabis policy. I think we're going to have to wait to really understand who some of these appointees are and how the candidates will fill out their cabinets. I think, of course, if a Harris wins, you're going to feel more comfortable and you're going to believe that Schedule 3 is more intact. If a Donald Trump wins, you're going to be holding your breath a bit more to find out who his attorney general appointee would be in that case. There's some that are going to be bad for that, and there's some that could potentially be good for Schedule 3 to happen. HHS appointee. We'll unpack all of that, as you said, next week on the spaces. But yeah, I'm looking more for how do they fill out the cabinet to really have a view on what the next Congress will look like for cannabis reform.
Well, something we should talk about as well. If Trump does win and we don't see a lot of advancement in cannabis reform, but we do see Amendment 3 pass, what does that do for the overall space? And what are the trends that we could see over the next year or two? Because we're starting to see in some of the earnings reports, some of the major MSOs starting to separate themselves. But those are some notable, I think, headlines or trends that you've talked about, Anthony Varel, in the past about how the fingerprints of this industry is really going to have the 3 or 4 major MSOs separate themselves from the industry, right?
Yeah. I do think though that we do need 280E to go away once and for all. Like we do need rescheduling.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, that will be very, very nice.
Indeed.
All things considered.
All right, AC, thanks for checking in. And we'll get back to people, like I said, on Twitter and confirm the day and time when we're going to have you, Anthony, as well, and Don Murphy on. And Gretchen will reach out to you to see if you have time, knowing your expertise on Washington and Capitol Hill. But AC, I think, I appreciate you kind of highlighting some of the stuff here today. And we'll talk, like I said, more in depth next week. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Lots of moving parts. And I do think, wouldn't that be a perfect world if Steve Daines was...
Yeah, it is. I think it should be definitely said that Anthony was pretty much right on. Steve Daines is a very dark horse candidate for that position. Chances are that he won't be in that leadership role.
Yeah.
But it would be great for us.
Yeah.
Also, it doesn't matter if the Safe Banking Act gets passed in lame duck. But I would like to see someone like a Daines in that leadership role.
Be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
What did we look at for the week? I was hoping to get Dan from the chart guys on. He's still dealing with a lot of stuff from that hurricane. Didn't get back to me, but
MSOS is up right now for the day. I mean, obviously air is still showing relative strength against its peers. It's still trading back to like 248, 250, which was the high of the week. I think was 252. But air's been green all week since Tuesday. I mean, one thing is where's MSOS right now? I think it's at 758. If I'm not mistaken, 759. It's at right now. It's up a little bit under 2%. I'm going to watch to see how the week ends. Hopefully we end strong. But I mean, also another thing that needs to be said is a lot of the buying right now is DAN and MSOS in the underlying. The underlyings are not getting purchased outside of MSOS, which is a big structural problem, which takes us back to custody and uplisting. I know Doug Cass was talking about it this morning. We all know that. It's really nothing new. High Tide is ripping right now. I mean, I bought High Tide.
What's up with
High Tide's actually, it's above $3. It's funny for me to see because I bought High Tide. It went down 30% following my purchase. Now I think it's up. On my position, I'm at, I think net, I'm up around 20% as of today on that trade. So that baby has round tripped.
Did Organigram have any news this morning? It's moving as well.
OGI is up 6%. I don't see any news on any of my screens.
Oh yeah, it is moving.
Yeah, my position in High Tide is now up 26%. So it's done about a 60% move round trip.
We need Raj Grover on for an interview ASAP. We literally had him on a couple weeks ago, James, but I know you guys love Raj. We could probably have him back on. A lot of people have reached out to, like, when can we have Curaleaf, Terracin, all those sorts of things, just so people understand, and I'm sure you do, but we're in a blackout period right now. Earnings is around the corner, so they're not available for any interviews post earnings, but we are working hard right now at scheduling out interviews during the week of earnings week. So we've reached out to Curaleaf. Who are some other notable names? Terracin, you've reached out to, Anthony.
Everybody. Curaleaf, Air, Cresco, Terracin, the Cannabis, Descend. We'll have all the majors on, with the exception of GTI, because they never come on for earnings.
Yeah. Irish writes, Canopy growth up 17% on the week. Thanks, everybody, for checking in and watching that video yesterday. Let us know your thoughts. Getting a lot of great feedback and comments, whether you like it or didn't like it. Love to hear from you. But the podcast itself is performing very, very well. What's another one? CGC has an open gap at 641. It needs to clear. People are buying OGI because they think all of MJ stocks are just US MSOS. So you may have a point, but I love that story. Anna, yes, Bina after earnings or before. When's the date of their latest earnings? Do we know off the top? But
OGI, I'm pretty sure it's November 8th.
We're going to have her on.
Oh no, OGI doesn't report until December.
Is it December? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're working on them to try to get them on for an interview. But yeah, we're definitely in conversations with Organigram and hoping to have, I don't know what the availability is for someone like Bina to come on prior to the earnings report. But we'll get back to you and confirm whether or not she's available next month. But long story short, we have reached out to the team, and I hope that helps. Yeah. SNDL doing well, 6% today so far. SNDL earnings on election day. Interesting.
Yeah, they came out that they're reporting November 5th.
High tide tearing it up. Guess we got to get Raj back on. Any other notable headlines that we saw in the last couple of days have been really quiet?
Yeah, Ron DeSantis diverted $4 million in budget from the opioid budget to fight Amendment 3 and 4 in the state of Florida. So Ron DeSantis has now diverted funds from an initiative that actually saved people's lives, and the reallocation of funds from that budget can actually result in Floridians' deaths to fight Amendment 3 and 4. That's the lengths that he's willing to go right now. And Florida has a very bad opioid epidemic. Florida was the epicenter for a lot of the pain clinics that were putting that shit on the streets. There's no reason to be diverting funds from a cause like that on a state level, especially as it's drug related, to fight something that's never killed anybody.
I know.
Joe Rogan, by the way, is happening tomorrow. Apparently him and Trump are shooting at noon today, and the episode will be out tomorrow.
Massive. What do you think that'll get for views?
It'll probably be the biggest media piece in the election cycle. I don't know how high of an impact it's going to be. I'm not sure if you don't know who you're voting for by now, then I don't really know what to tell you.
I actually think that there is an influence of being on Joe Rogan at the last minute. I really do. I still think there's a lot of people on the fence right now, but I'd be curious to see because, look.
I don't agree with you.
Look, there's a ton of people that have already made up their decision, regardless of who says what. They've made up their decision. Like, I've even talked to people from Michigan after Trump went to the athletic club in downtown Detroit, very preeminent club for a lot of influential business people within the state of Michigan. And he was in front of 200 or 300 people a couple of weeks ago and said, if you vote Kamala Harris in, you want to know what's really going to happen to this country? It's the same thing to this country has happened to the city of Detroit. It's going to turn into Detroit. And I could not believe he said this in front of this group of people. But you still talk to people from Michigan, and it just doesn't really matter what he's saying. They're voting for Donald Trump. And I think same could be said for the opposite side. A lot of division right now, but that's going to get a ton of views. I'm curious to see how Rogan will navigate that conversation. But go on. What were you going to say?
Also, just a couple of people in the comments. Ron DeSantis is done as governor for the state of Florida, which is why he's taking his stance against 3 and 4. He doesn't have to worry about getting reelected. We have term limits in Florida. Ron is out as governor when his term is up that he's serving right now. So there is no reelection for Governor DeSantis.
When is his term up?
I think his term is up. It's 2024, 2026.
Yeah. And congressmen, congresswomen, they get reelected, every 2 years?
2-year runs, yeah.
And senators are every 6.
6.
Right, with a third of those basically being up for re-election every 2 years. So how many members are there in the Senate? Do we know?
Senate's 100.
It's 100.
2 from each state.
So 33 of them, 2 years, the other 33, 2 years after that, and the other 33, 2 years after that.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Are you surprised at all just with when he takes money from basically one budget to the next, like when he's doing this, does he not think that people are actually going to understand and read this and look into this?
I don't think he cares. Like I said, I don't think he cares. There's no ramifications to what he's doing. He doesn't have to worry about getting elected back into office.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. He can do whatever he wants. I mean, Ron can literally do whatever he wants.
True. Good point. Did anyone watch the Willie Nelson's Cannabis Community for Harris Zoom last night? I actually was given a heads up. I forgot to watch that. I did not, but
I had zero interest in watching that.
Yeah. All right, gents. Anthony, good stuff here today. And we'll get that Twitter space going next week. Again, everybody, we'll give you a quick update over the weekend on Twitter to let you know when we're going to have that with Don. Gretchen, if you're available, we'll let you know the day and time as well, because it'd be helpful to have you on with a little bit of direction as well. And let's see how this week finishes off with, again.
One question that actually is pretty pertinent. Big alcohol is not entering the space until the FDA has a label that can go on product, just like what you see on alcohol. I've been told that by 3 big alcohol companies. They will not enter the space until the FDA has rules and regs from a CPG perspective till they have that warning label on products. That is confirmed, and that is what they are waiting for.
Wow. Dank Informer. According to John Morgan, Ron raised a lot of money from special interests during his presidential campaign. It is now paying back the favor, Big Pharma, etc., by opposing Amendment 3. Lots of stories on the scenes.
Everyone raises from special interests for presidential runs. You have to, unfortunately.
Yeah. Gretchen, you like it when I read the American political system out loud? Yeah, still learning. Lots of moving parts. All right, we'll let you run. As usual, people, again, we're seeing tremendous growth with the Baked In newsletter. If you haven't done so already, just make sure to scan that QR code below and subscribe to our Baked In newsletter. Lots of coverage going on as we gear up towards the U.S. federal election and the impact it'll have on cannabis reform. So if you want to get some great takeaways, please let us know. And if you refer this newsletter to 10 of your friends and get them to sign up, we're going to give you a free TDR hoodie. So please, if you can, make sure to subscribe. As usual, smash that like button. Love to hear your comments. And in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day and weekend. And we'll see you back here Monday at 4 o'clock.
See you, everybody.
So there it is, everybody. What'd you think of our latest live stream? You love the content we're creating? Anything we're missing? Leave some comments below. We'd love to hear from you. All kinds of things that we like to discuss, but the most important topics, they come from you. And make sure to smash that like button. We'd be very much appreciated. Also, another thing, 60% of our audience, they're subscribed right now. 40% is not. So if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to our channel, because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks for watching, everybody.